What if I told you your life could change forever? Not because of luck, but because the universe has already been sending you signs. The frightening part is that almost everyone ignores them until it's too late. If you've been feeling restless, losing people, or noticing strange coincidences, don't click away. According to Carl Jung's psychology, these aren't random events. They may be the beginning of the biggest transformation of your life. The strangest part isn't that the universe gives signs before your life changes. It's that most people mistake those signs for bad luck and walk away from the greatest transformation they were ever meant to experience. Think about your own life for a moment. Have you ever felt as if something invisible was pulling you away from the person you used to be? Maybe relationships started fading without explanation. Maybe opportunities disappeared just when you thought you had finally found your path. Maybe your mind refused to settle, leaving you restless, even in places that once felt like home. Most people call these moments failure. Carl Jung would have seen something very different. He believed that the deepest transformations rarely begin with comfort. They begin with disruption. Before a new version of yourself can emerge, the old one has to lose its grip. What feels like chaos may actually be the unconscious preparing you for a life you cannot yet imagine. The question is, what if these unsettling moments aren't random at all? What if they're signals? Signals that your life is approaching a turning point, so significant that, years from now, you'll divide your story into two chapters: the person you were before and the person you became after. If you've been noticing strange patterns lately, stay with me, because the signs we're about to explore are often dismissed by almost everyone. Yet, those who recognize them at the right moment frequently discover that what looked like an ending was actually the beginning of everything they had been searching for. The first sign often arrives so quietly that almost nobody notices it. You begin to outgrow the life that once made perfect sense. Nothing dramatic happens overnight. Your job is still the same. Your home hasn't changed. The people around you continue living exactly as they always have. But inside, something feels different. Conversations that once excited you now feel empty. Goals that used to motivate you suddenly seem too small. You wake up with an unexplainable feeling that you no longer belong where you are. Many people panic during this stage. They assume something is wrong with them. But Jung believed that growth often begins with inner conflict. The unconscious starts pushing against the identity you've spent years building. Not because it wants to destroy you, but because it knows you've become too small for your own potential. Imagine trying to wear clothes that fit you perfectly when you were 10 years old. They weren't bad clothes. You simply outgrew them. The same thing happens psychologically. The personality that protected you yesterday may become the prison that limits you tomorrow. This feeling is uncomfortable because your conscious mind wants certainty, while your deeper self demands evolution. Most people resist. They distract themselves. They numb the discomfort. They convince themselves they're simply tired. But the people who eventually transform ask a different question. What is this discomfort trying to teach me? That single question changes everything. Because the moment you stop running from the feeling, it begins revealing the direction your life has been waiting to take. And that leads to something even stranger. As soon as you begin changing internally, your external world starts changing too. This is the second sign. People begin disappearing from your life, not because you've become unkind, not because you've failed, but because your energy no longer matches environments built for an older version of yourself. This can be painful. Friends stop calling. Conversations become forced. Relationships that once felt effortless suddenly require exhausting amounts of energy. At first, it feels like rejection. But look deeper. Jung often described life as a process of individuation. The lifelong journey of becoming your authentic self rather than living according to expectations placed upon you by others. That journey has a cost. Not everyone who knew the old version of you will recognize or even accept the new one, and that's okay. Imagine climbing a mountain. The higher you go, the fewer people remain beside you, not because you're better than them, simply because you're walking a different path. Many people sabotage their transformation at this exact point. They chase old friendships. They force broken relationships. They return to environments they've already outgrown just to avoid feeling lonely. But loneliness isn't always punishment. Sometimes it's the space where your future finally has room to enter. Every meaningful transformation requires letting go of something familiar. The caterpillar doesn't negotiate with the cocoon. It surrenders to the process. And perhaps that's exactly what life is asking from you. To trust what you cannot yet understand, because once certain doors close, something unexpected begins happening inside your own mind. This is where the third sign appears. You become unusually drawn towards silence, not because you're depressed, not because you've lost your ambition, but because noise no longer satisfies you. You start spending more time alone. Long walks become more meaningful than crowded rooms. You begin questioning ideas you've believed your entire life. The opinions of strangers lose their power. You stop reacting to every notification. You crave moments where you can simply hear yourself think. Modern culture often mistakes silence for weakness. It tells us to stay busy, stay entertained, stay distracted. But Jung understood something timeless. The unconscious speaks softly. If your life is filled with constant noise, you'll never hear it. Many of history's greatest breakthroughs didn't happen in crowded meetings. They happened in solitude. A scientist staring out of a window, an artist walking through the woods, a philosopher sitting quietly beneath the night sky. Silence isn't empty. It's where hidden parts of yourself finally have the courage to speak. Maybe that's why you've recently found yourself pulling away from endless scrolling. Maybe that's why meaningless conversations leave you exhausted. Maybe that's why you're suddenly fascinated by psychology, philosophy, spirituality, or understanding the deeper patterns behind life. These aren't random interests. They often appear when your unconscious begins searching for a more meaningful identity. Jung believed every person carries unexplored parts of themselves waiting to be discovered. Most people die having met only a fraction of who they could have become. But every once in a while, life interrupts your routine just long enough for you to hear that quiet, inner voice asking a dangerous question. What if you're capable of far more than you've ever believed? That question can change the direction of an entire lifetime. Because once you begin listening to that voice, reality itself starts behaving differently. You notice patterns that never stood out before. Coincidences become impossible to ignore. Unexpected opportunities appear exactly when you need them. It almost feels as though something unseen is quietly arranging pieces behind the scenes. Whether you call it the universe, destiny, synchronicity, or the wisdom of the unconscious, one thing becomes impossible to deny. Your old life is no longer trying to hold you. It's preparing to release you. And the next signs become even more impossible to ignore. And the next signs become even more impossible to ignore. The fourth sign is something most people mistake for confusion. You begin questioning everything you once believed. Not because you've become lost, but because you're finally becoming honest. Beliefs you inherited from your family. Definitions of success borrowed from society. Dreams you chased simply because everyone else was chasing them. One by one, they begin falling apart. At first, this feels terrifying. The human mind craves certainty. It would rather cling to a familiar lie than face an uncomfortable truth. But Jung believed that every meaningful transformation begins with confronting the illusions we've built our identity upon. He once suggested that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Think about that. How many of your decisions are truly yours? How many fears belong to someone else? How many limits were quietly planted in your mind long before you ever questioned them? The moment you begin asking these questions, something remarkable happens. Your life stops running on autopilot. You no longer react the way you always have. You pause, you observe, you choose. That pause may seem insignificant, but inside that single moment lives the power to rewrite an entire future. Because every extraordinary life begins the same way, not with certainty, but with one courageous question. And just when your mind begins clearing away years of conditioning, the universe sends another unmistakable signal. The fifth sign. Unexpected opportunities begin appearing where you least expect them. Not miracles, not lottery tickets. Opportunities. A conversation that happens by accident. A book that finds you at exactly the right moment. A stranger whose words stay with you for years. A door that opens just after another one slammed shut. To everyone else, these are coincidences. Jung called them something else, synchronicity. Meaningful coincidences that cannot easily be explained by chance alone. Whether you believe in synchronicity literally or simply see it as your mind recognizing meaningful patterns, the effect is often the same. You begin paying attention. Suddenly, life doesn't feel random anymore. You realize that every painful experience has quietly prepared you for something that couldn't have happened any earlier. Imagine trying to solve a 1,000-piece puzzle while staring at only one corner. Nothing makes sense. But as more pieces come together, a picture slowly appears. That is how transformation works. Life rarely reveals the entire plan. It only gives you the next step. And those willing to take that step often discover another one waiting. Then another, then another. Until one day they look back and realize every detour carried hidden purpose. The people who change their lives aren't always the smartest. They're the ones willing to trust the next step, before they can see the entire staircase. But its next sign may be the hardest of them all, because it demands something few people are willing to face. The sixth sign is that your deepest fears suddenly become impossible to avoid. The very thing you've spent years escaping now stands directly in front of you. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood, fear of starting over, fear of becoming successful and no longer recognizing yourself. It's as though life deliberately shines a spotlight on every insecurity you've hidden in the dark. Most people interpret this as proof they should turn back. But what if it's proof they're finally standing at the edge of real growth? Jung spent much of his life's work exploring what he called the shadow, the hidden parts of ourselves we reject, our fears, our anger, our shame, our unrealized potential. Here's the paradox. The more you run from your shadow, the more power it gains over your life. But the moment you turn around and face it, its grip begins to weaken. Imagine standing before a locked door your entire life. You've always assumed something terrifying waited behind it. Then one day, you gather enough courage to open it. Instead of finding a monster, you discover pieces of yourself you've been searching for all along. Strength, wisdom, compassion, confidence, not because they suddenly appeared, because they were always there, hidden beneath fear. Transformation doesn't happen when fear disappears. It happens when your purpose becomes greater than your fear. And perhaps that's why every hero's journey begins with uncertainty. Every successful entrepreneur, every inspiring artist, every extraordinary leader, at some point stood exactly where you might be standing today, wondering whether to stay comfortable or become who they were meant to be. Then comes the final sign, the one that changes everything. You begin feeling an unshakable sense that your life is leading somewhere greater. You can't fully explain it. You don't have all the answers. You don't know exactly how things will unfold. But beneath the uncertainty, there's peace. A quiet confidence replacing constant anxiety. You stop obsessing over perfect timing. You stop comparing your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20. You stop begging life to move faster. Instead, you begin working, learning, growing, showing up, one day at a time. This isn't blind optimism. It's something deeper. It's the realization that your future isn't built in one dramatic moment. It's built by hundreds of small decisions no one applauds. Every healthy habit, every difficult conversation, every act of courage, every moment you choose discipline over comfort. These invisible choices become the architecture of your destiny. Perhaps that's why the universe never changes your life overnight. It changes you little by little, until one morning you wake up and realize you're no longer the person who once prayed for the life you're living. The transformation wasn't sudden. Your awareness simply caught up with reality. So if you've recognized yourself in these signs, don't panic, don't rush, and don't assume your life is falling apart. You may be standing in the exact place where your greatest chapter begins. Carl Jung believed that the privilege of a lifetime is becoming who you truly are. Not who the world expected, not who fear created, not who your past convinced you to remain, but the person hidden beneath every mask you've ever worn. Maybe that's why you've watched this video today. Not because everything here predicts your future, but because something inside you already knew it was time to stop ignoring the quiet voice that has been calling you forward. The universe doesn't force transformation. It offers invitations. Most people never notice them. Some notice them, but are too afraid to respond. And a rare few choose to answer. Years later, they don't remember the fear that almost stopped them. They remember the decision that changed everything. Maybe this isn't the end of a video. Maybe it's the beginning of the life you've been preparing for all along. The signs were never meant to impress you. They were meant to awaken you. And now that you've seen them, the only question left is, what will you do next?